Why would you even murder that guy? But anyway. Oh, we're live. Hey,
Yeah,
dude.
we're on the air.
What's up? What's up, man? Eating a little lunch, I see. That's cool. So God Theory. Hey, it's been like 2 weeks, dude. There's so much to talk about. So much to talk
Yeah.
about.
Sadly, it's been an eventful 2 weeks in the field of religion.
Oh, yeah. I know, man. So you're a man of France. Is that what they call you? So a francophone? A man of France?
That's my job title.
Yeah. Duh. What would you even expect if you saw that? Hey, give out a card. David Drake, man of France.
Like, wait, what?
Seriously, that needs to happen.
Yeah, I'll have those made.
Did you ever see American Psycho?
No.
Oh, okay. So Christopher Bale, it's where he kind of got to start. That's my understanding, at least, is when he kind of hit it big before The
Not
Machinist.
Newsies?
You know? No, I never even saw that show. But yes, I did actually. I remember that. Okay. He hands out these. There's a point where it shines a light on like the stupid business, high expense business culture, and I was part of this for a little bit when I worked at the Pinnacle Group. But he pulls out his card and he's like, "Here's my card." And he's like, "It's pearl white back with, it's just got some letters on it, some names." And he's like, "Pearl white back with crimson lettering." And then another guy pulls out and he's like, "Oh, that's interesting. I just got mine redone." And he pulls his out. He says something like, "Oh, that's a ivory background with red or satin red lining." And they all look exactly the same, but they describe him differently. And he gets like super jealous about him. It's just funny. That's how you need to get your card that looks like that. Get that out there quick. Man of France. France man. That's better.
Sounds like a Captain America kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So, man, a lot's been going on. First of all, we've got, I don't know so you and I both come from Mountain Home, a tiny little city. I'll call it a town maybe. Population about like 10,000. But it's very spread out, so that sounds deceptively large. It's not. But one of the things they did was it's another one of these places that's getting upset about people asking to put anything other than a nativity scene up. And they've done this. It finally resolved. And then the lawyer went to go try to get money for it because, of course, it fell on the side of us where they were like, dude, yeah, you can't just put nativity scene up and deny everyone else. Either you got to let them put up a menorah or you've got to take down the nativity scene. It's all or nothing, buddy. And he was like, fine, whatever. But after dragging the city out in I think $72,000 of legal fees or something, the prosecutor, the person who brought this to court, the injustice part, was asking for the money back, and all these people are freaking out on her. They're like, "Oh, how could you? You're such a piece of shit. You're wasting the city's money." When the entire time the lawyer had been saying repeatedly, "Don't do this. You're going to waste the city's money." And this has the most stare decisis is the idea that, let the decision stand. If it's been ruled on before, you have almost no chance of ruling a different reason.
Yeah,
certainly not.
There's clear precedent on this one, and you have to charge money, or they'll keep doing it. Like, you have to do it. There has to be some kind of consequence, right? And yeah, it sucks that the taxpayers' money is getting wasted, but that's something that keep in mind when they're voting in the future. It's like, oh, this guy threw $70,000 down the toilet because he wanted to fight an obviously wrong, illegal battle.
I know, and what's hilarious is his wife was my bus driver teacher, and we were like mortal enemies. She hated me. I was she started picking on me and my sister, particularly because I can't remember, but I think it was because my sister, she was a little bit of a hellion, and I was just a class clown. That would be giving myself too much credit. Imagine a class clown that's not funny. That was like me.
Most class clowns.
Yeah, so a class clown. And I brought that culture on the bus because it got me attention and people liked me because of it for whatever reason. But anyway, she hated me to the point, I pulled pranks on her. I just did whatever I could to make her life a living hell because she kept picking on my sister and then picking on me. And then it became funny what I could get away with. Anyway, her husband is the one now. So there's almost a little sick little Schadenfreude that's happening there. It's a psychological term. I don't know it. So
awesome.
What else though? What's the big one?
Well, obviously we didn't record last week, but if we did, we would have talked about the Paris shootings and
Paris Hilton was killed?
Yes, sadly, it's too soon. No, there was a terrorist attack. Everyone knows about that. One interesting thing for me was the barrage of people who, after the Paris attack, started saying there was a Lebanon attack, which I hadn't heard about. Did you heard about the attack in Lebanon?
No.
Yeah, the media didn't really cover it, but what was interesting is it feels like a lot of people were just holding on to that nugget and then just brought it out later just to make you feel racist for caring about Paris.
Did they? Is that what happened?
Did you catch a lot of that?
Yeah. I was just wondering if that self-report matched reality. Was it that they heard about it beforehand?
Yeah, if they did, they didn't say a peep about it. 2 days earlier when it happened, they just waited until everyone started changing their pictures to French flags, and it's like, well, what about Lebanon? What about the Lebanon flag? And it's like, well, yeah, I guess we just didn't know about it. Didn't get covered as much. And there is something to the idea of we should value all lives, and we tend to gloss over violence in the Middle East or in countries that aren't in Europe. Just as like one of the dangers of living there. It's like, well, they should have thought about that before they lived in North Africa. What can you say?
Before they were born and raised there.
Yeah, so I get the point. I get why they're doing that, but it does kind of feel like, hey, racists, look at this. Like it's almost like a way for the person posting it to feel superior morally. Like, oh, here's a tragedy, but you're doing it wrong. You're mourning the tragedy wrong. You should have mourned this other tragedy that you didn't hear about.
Yeah,
so, I don't know. That always kind of bugs me when people try and take the moral high ground. It's like, guys, people are dying. Can we just sit with that for a minute without moralizing?
There you go. Yeah, it's like whenever that French cartoonist wrote back and said, "We don't need your prayers. Religious extremism essentially is what got us here."
Yeah, we have more than enough religion in France right now. That's why we're here.
But like we pursue different values, and a lot of people repost that, and then there's a bunch of people who got angry. Even like one of my personal friends that runs a podcast. I almost de-anonymized that. Anyway, I almost identified that, but was really upset by the fact that they're like, this is not the time for that. Come on, and I was like, yeah, okay, I could see that. Yeah, we do just need to sit with, like you said, just be present for a minute and just suffer the anguish with them. But I think the problem is yeah, there's a lot of violence that goes on in that section, and so whenever you hear about more violence, you're like, ugh, it's almost like when you've got yeah, it's like when you got the prodigal son who's out there and he's they're like, oh man, he's another night he slept without a roof over his head. You're like, ugh, that's horrible. Okay, I already know that's part of his situation, so that's fine. Not that it's fine, but it doesn't. If every time you lament it that much, it would suck. But whenever it happens, like to such stark degree in a region that's very much valued peace and has done a lot towards that, I do feel like it's a little different.
It feels more personal when it's a place that you've either been or are planning on going someday. I feel like everybody in America either has been or wants to go at some point in their lives to Paris. Maybe that's just me projecting, my liberal views, but I feel like that's it. The data backs me up on this. Paris is the most visited, like France is the biggest tourist destination of the world. More people go to France on vacation than anywhere else. So it does feel like it hits closer to home when it's someplace that you were planning on taking your fiance or your wife or your kids, then not a lot of us were planning trips to Beirut or to Mali. There was an attack in Mali a couple days ago. Like, that sucks, but it's human psychology. And I'm going to tell you this as an expert, so listen up.
I'm all ears.
Human psychology, we tend to there's a degree of separation. Like, the further away something is, the less it affects us, right? So an earthquake, the tsunami in Japan got way less play here than the fires in Colorado Springs, because those actually displaced people we knew, even though more people died in Japan. So it's this question of removal, and we tend to identify more with Paris than with, Paris is the cultural center of the West, right? Like, this is where philosophy, art, existentialism, cinema, like all these things have a very strong presence in Paris. And so it does feel closer to home, per se, when you have Paris getting attacked than someplace that you've never even heard of or weren't ever planning on visiting.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, all lives are equally valuable and we should be mourning them all. But that's should, right? Like, the fact of the matter is, just as humans, we tend to be more worried about things that feel closer to us.
Yeah, it's interesting about that. There's a lot of interesting data. So I'll tell you what we know and then like where the theory is. But we know that, language is relatively new. Imagine, hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. And then in the last little bit, you get what we have now, an explosion of different languages and God knows how many. Just pick up a dictionary and then just kind of just revel in that moment, or just be there and just be like, holy shit, that's a lot of words. Like, we made that up. Now,
no, actually, the Tower of Babel, we used to all speak the same language, and then God fucked it up. Yeah, it's okay. It's not okay. I mean, the linguistics thing. You probably haven't.
Still, Tower of Babel, not that long ago. But anyway, so we've got a lot of words. Now, the funny thing is, we're not equipped to handle conceptualizations of things. We do it. We have it, but it's weird that we take an attitude towards those things like real life. For example, so right now we judge, when we were primates, danger by distance, right? We've got a lot of information that we know that's true. There's been experiments towards like, how far away, imagine on your mind in a map walking a certain distance, and then danger happens, and then how much does that disturb you, that kind of thing. And then also like how far away something is, it distresses us less if it's further away. Because, you see a lion across the savannah, I'm good. It's way over there. It's literally a tiny speck. I'm fine. However, if you turn around, it's right there. You're like, fuck me. It's fight, flight, or freeze immediately, right? That's actually it's precognitive. It's without even thinking, you do that. Now, what's weird is we have to fit that danger sense, right? That way to organize danger data into this new idea of like maps and then social circles. So like a friend of a friend would be like, let's say JT's friend from Kansas City Oasis, a place he goes, right? They were murdered. Now, the degree to which how do you make a spatial conceptualization of danger and how to physiologically and psychologically respond to it? How do you parse that into our machine? Well, you do that through space. So the funny thing is, we say, oh, so it's about that far. Like we get this conceptualization of space to understand how we should respond to it. So one, there's geographical space, and we know through the experimentation that people will respond differently to that, depending on how far geographically they are. Like if it's across the street, my across the street neighbors got robbed, I'd be very distressed by that, even though I don't know them very well. Whereas if that same person got robbed 4 streets down, I'd be less concerned because of that personal danger. But also on a map, from peoples that are far away, we have less empathy for them, which sucks. But this is part of how we are as humans. We got a lot of evolving to do before we change this. Unfortunately, I'm not saying it's a good
we're
thing.
not that different from tribal species still.
Yeah, it's
a useful evolutionary thing to care about people who are close to you and not care about people who are different than you. That used to save a lot of lives. Now it sucks, but it used to be useful.
Well, and there's more to it than that. Here's what's interesting, is that people who look like us and who speak similarly, or we have many interactions with, or we hear about them a lot, we perceive them as closer. And so when danger happens to them, we become more responsive. And so France has done that, Beirut hasn't. So it's natural that we do. So when someone shames someone, I'm just like, well, they just haven't had the time to challenge that very normal evolutionary imperative. Don't shame them. Like, just say, oh, hey, you've got this very natural thing going on. You may want to think about this, and don't be a fucking dick. That's like the whole thing of this podcast on my side of things. Stop being a dick.
Stop being a dick. That's like the theme of Star Wars too, so it fits.
It is?
Yeah, like the whole theme of Star Wars is don't be a dick. Like, that's it. Like,
so the Imperial March is just being a dick. Like, it's just
being a dick,
ramming dick
kicking around. Yeah, just blowing up planets.
That makes sense. Yeah. And they just want people to be less dicks. That makes sense.
But yeah, again, it'd be one thing if they were raising awareness when it happened, but to do it right after everyone starts talking about Paris, just to point out like how racist everyone's being, it just felt very like, come on, man. If you really cared about Lebanon, you would have brought it up, or at least been aware of it happening when it happened.
Yeah.
If your motivation was just to advertise that you're a morally superior person to all these other people, then mission accomplished. But
I'm sad that didn't go away. Like, a lot of people who, when they deconvert from any religion, they typically start shucking off baggage. But it seems like there's a natural. I don't know if this is baggage from religion in general, or if this is a
Human thing.
yeah, a human thing. Like this idea of, I'm assuming they tie the social hierarchy scale to morality, and then they gain benefit in one, they gain benefit in the other. I guess I'm not, because I don't think there's such thing as a morality. I don't think there's anything like that. I think people generally do what's best for them and best for themselves, and that if they allow themselves to have empathy, then they're going to be good people. It's just what places do we turn on and off our empathy? I think tells a lot about us.
Yeah.
For example, the Syrian refugees thing.
Right. That's where this is one of the things that, from someone who's been researching the relationship between America and France for a long time. I wrote a paper that got published about as an undergrad about the Bush administration and the
there it is,
Mr.
Guys.
Undergrad, Mr.
Oh, is it the holidays? Because he's talking about his publishing again. Just kidding.
Yeah, so just put my bona fides out there. My bona fides. We have had, they really are our oldest ally. We've had very strong ties to France. And seeing the Republicans throw them under the bus during the early 2000s with the Freedom Fries and when you get down to it, here's what happened. Hey, we're really scared because of a terror attack. Yeah, that's understandable, man. You guys lost a lot of people. Yeah, we're going to invade Iraq. Oh, did they attack you? Nah, they didn't.
But some of their people have the same ideology.
Okay, so I don't know. Is this justified at all? Yeah, they've got weapons of mass destruction. No, they really don't. We've looked into this. Like, nobody thinks they do. Our guys think they do, so we're going to invade. Could you hold off a minute? Let's just be sure that they have them first. Nah, we're just going to do this right now. Oh, we're going to oppose you. That sounds wildly illegal and unethical. France are cowards. They're cheese-eating surrender monkeys. Like, that was the narrative that we got in America, right? We call them freedom fries, even though French fries come from Belgium, so fuck you. Like, they're not even French. Like, it's just so much of that. And then France gets attacked. Terror attacks, 2 in 1 year, because remember Charlie Hebdo was in January. So they get attacked, and suddenly everyone's all like, oh, France, war on terror, we got your back, bro. And they're acting more cowardly than the French ever did. The French, when they got attacked, here's what happened. Oh, we just had a bunch of terrorists? Okay, well, we're not going to let them intimidate us into not accepting refugees. That's stupid. That's exactly what they want. So we're going to recommit to taking in all these refugees that we said that we'd take in. Also, we're going to bomb the shit out of their training facilities. So here's a well-reasoned surgical response. And also, we're not going to lose our fucking minds from fear. And it's understandable to like start making decisions based on fear. And 9/11 was a great bigger scale than the Paris attack by a factor of 10, right? Like, a lot more people died. But that being said, this was the first attack like this in Paris since the Nazis. And it is a shock to their system. And the way they handled it, I think, speaks very highly to their political system, because they didn't just lose their fucking minds and shut down. They shut down their borders that night to like contain keep people from escaping. Right. But they didn't just say like no more refugees and we're going to elect the most right-wing person we can think of. Whereas America, it didn't even happen to us, but we had like how many governors just randomly say, oh, by the way, no refugees for New Hampshire. New Hampshire's not accepting refugees. Sorry, everybody. Like that's a thing that governors can decide. Like, that's even part of their purview. But it's just this fear-based reaction. Like, we seem to react to terror with terror. Like, the way the terrorists want you to react, that's what Americans 9 times out of 10 are going to do. And then we turn around and make fun of the French for being cowardly. It's a weird dichotomy. It just never made sense to me.
It's a confirmation bias. I mean, like, anytime someone has a thought and they look to go dig for evidence for that, whether it's from your own memories or from your own quote unquote values, oftentimes values, people's understandings of values at least conflict, and they don't realize it. They never understand it. It's almost like in the Bible where there's a scripture for everything, for literally everything. And so people think it's true because every time they have run into a situation, they dig for evidence, confirmation bias. They get a quote from the Bible that supports their position, and they go, "Wow, it's so true. How strange that it just so happened to be where I was headed towards. Wow, awesome." So that's the shitty part of that. And I think the Syrian thing, man, I've talked about it a lot. I went to war against terrorists. I know what it's like it sucks, man. Like, I get it. I don't want any terrorist attacks to happen. I also know that there's a lot of militants that are going to be coming over looking for refuge as well. You know, everyone kind of got displaced. So I've kind of struggled with this. You know, I've asked a lot of people about it and what their thoughts were, you know, try to get a good, it's almost like when you run into a problem in psychology for me, if I run into something where I'm like, what do I do about this? And if it's something that's not real clear, there's not an evidence-based treatment for it, I'll just consult the people I respect. And so I've been doing that. And
oh, you haven't asked me, so I guess you don't respect me.
I was going to wait till this.
No, I hate this rhetoric that we have of why are we taking care of strangers when we have veterans who are homeless, or why are we taking care of strangers when there are kids who aren't eating? It's like, you fucking hypocrite. When's the last time you gave a sandwich to a homeless person? Like, you don't care. Like, don't make this about that. And secondly, we've never had a refugee who was a terrorist. Like, that's never happened. We've had Christian terrorists, we've had right-wing terrorists, we've had all kinds of terrorists in our country. No refugees were terrorists because they're fleeing the terror. That's why they're here. And there's a huge screening process. I actually read this guy who does immigration law, and he specializes in sanctuary and refugee and asylum status. And he actually walked through with me the process that they use to screen refugees to get them into America. And there's this huge process, like way more than any other kind of immigration that we do. Like, they stay in these camps for a long time. A lot of them don't even want to be relocated because they're hoping it'll die down. They can go back to their homes, because turns out people like living in their homes. Like, that's what they prefer, if all things being equal. And so anyway, it's a fear response. And like fear is a useful emotion, but it's not useful for coming to logical decisions most of the time.
Mm. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I get it. I get the fear. I get the fact that, you know, I mean, we already have terrorist cells in America. One of my jobs in the military was to, you know, look at those sorts of things. We do, you know, we're suppressed that knowledge to a sense. We don't fearmonger as a government as much as the Republican Party does as a separate entity. But as the intelligence community, you know, we typically suppress those things so people don't freak out. But they're here. It's true. And this isn't going to help. But it's like, if we should turn him away, if we want to be consistent in our beliefs, then we also need to never go on a date with a man if you're a woman, because you could get sexually assaulted or physically assaulted. I shouldn't run at night, even on well-lit roads, because I could get hit by a car, etc. Like, you know, you're living your life on the chance of the extremes. You're neglecting your values as a humanist, or if you're not a humanist, a religious person who purportedly cares about other people because of what might happen. And that's no way to live life.
It's no way to live life, and it's not even factually. It's not even the data doesn't even back that up. Like, have you seen that Mike Huckabee was like, "Hey, would you take a handful of peanuts from a bowl of peanuts and 10 of them are poisoned? Would you feed them to your kids?" It's like, no. That if we were looking at the statistics, we've had, I think the closest we've had to a refugee bomb, like doing a terror attack, was the Boston Marathon, and those were kids who came in when they were 5 as asylum seekers, so it was a little bit different. But they came in on a tourist visa, and then they started applying for asylum, and that's the closest we've ever had in our nation's history to a refugee doing a terror attack. It's someone who came in on a tourist visa. So these turning away refugees would not even stop them from getting here. And so 10 peanuts in a bowl of peanuts, that's assuming we've had 10 refugees in a bowl of refugees who have been terrorists. And that's just not the case. Even in Paris, like someone had a Syrian passport or something, but we're finding out that was just planted there by the ISIS to further obfuscate the waters. Like, this is what they want. They want us to stop trusting people from other countries and to stop taking them in. And so we're playing right into their hands.
Right. It'd be better to do it more like France did. But whenever anybody uses an analogy, so essentially an analogy is a substitution method, right? Like, you take a logical argument, you take that skeleton, and you bring it over here, and then you add in, you keep the important parts, right, the structure, and then you add in contextualization, different contextualization, so people can understand it. It helps you understand what they think is important whenever a person uses an analogy, because if they leave out the important parts, that's important. What they did was they devalued the point, one of the most important parts of it, which is if you have a value of helping humans, it's not about peanuts, right? Because who cares if you eat fucking peanuts? No one gives a shit. I could not eat peanuts or eat peanuts, and my day would be no different. If it would be more like if you saw someone in the middle of the road dying, and there was a chance you might get AIDS if you helped them. Would you help them? It would be more like that. We're talking about something
like,
that's
I don't know, like what's a famous story about let's say like there's a guy from Samaria and he's walking and the Samaritan sees someone on the side of the road who was beaten up by robbers and he helps them. Like if that's a value that you claim to support, that would be the analogy, not peanuts.
It seems pretty far-fetched though, David. I think peanuts is better here.
Feels like Huckabee's understanding of analogies is like Britta from Community. Like blaming it on that is like blaming my inability to make analogies on watermelons.
And the vets thing. Oh, I have to. That makes me very upset. I am currently, of course, almost everyone is struggling with the VA system at some point. And I've actually paid for doctor's appointments right now just because it's not worth the shit you have to go through. It's horrible. It's horrible. And
these Republicans are voting down veterinary, like
that's what
not veterinary, but vet rights, and then saying, like we have homeless vets. Like you don't give a fuck if you're electing a congressman who votes against vets, and then saying we have homeless vets is like that's a reason why we can't. First of all, false dichotomy. We can help both of them. That's a dumb thing to say. But second of all, if that's your reasoning, then stop voting for Republicans. If you care about vets, stop. Vote for Bernie Sanders. He's the only one talking about this.
Yeah. And I think with the vet thing in particular, there's a lot of lip service from that side, which, makes me upset because and when they say we've got a homeless problem, I'm like, yeah, we do. Do you know who's trying to fix that? Is it Republicans or are they talking about entitlements? I want to kick someone in the teeth when they say that. I'm going to try not to get fired up about this, but I do. Oh, man. Entitlements. What the fuck does that mean? It's a social safety net. Yes, people abuse it. Some people do. I know. Amy works with people right now who are like, I'm going to go get my crazy money. I got to convince them I can't work. And I'm like, oh, that's shitty. Some people do that. Mm-hmm. So like most people don't. And one of the people that was talking about this that I got in a Facebook fight with, not fight. I try to be as cordial as possible, but in my mind I was like, "What?" Like, yes. I know. I was like, "Move over, little John," because what? But I was upset because I'm so absurd. Why did anyway? Because that person in particular had been on a social safety net system for a long time.
Most of us,
to
like
the point,
everybody.
Yeah, to the point where it finished. And I was too. Whenever I got back from Iraq, I couldn't get a job right away. I tried. I'm a young, able-bodied dude. I should be able to do that, but I couldn't.
I'm privileged. I'm a white guy in America from a middle-class family, and I had to be like, I had to have my student loans subsidized by FAFSA. That's government aid.
Unemployment insurance. I had to get that, which is welfare. I had to be on welfare when I got back, and it's humiliating. You have to go stand in line, do all this shit. And I'm like, I know I'm looking around. There's like old people and like, in wheelchairs, and I'm standing there looking like I do, like a guy who could probably pick up a box or do literally anything. And I'm just like, shit. Like it's humiliating. There's nothing. I mean, I'm not saying that people can't approach that process and not be humiliated. I'm just saying
it depends on. I think there's two values, right? Like there's people who value punishing wrong above everything else. Fairness, you could say, like they don't want anyone to get away with anything. And then there's people who value, justice and mercy, essentially, right? Because there's people who value helping other people. And so if you have 100 people and like 3 of them are guilty of a crime and you're on that jury, you're going to vote not guilty. Let's say you have to judge all of them at once. And you know that if you vote not guilty, 97 innocent people will walk and 3 guilty people will hang. I think some Republicans are going to hang all 100 just to make sure nobody gets away with it. And some people are going to say, no, I'd rather not punish an innocent person, even if it means some guilty people are going to get away with something.
Yeah. And I can get the concern about security. I get it. Like, I don't like terrorism pisses me off. And obviously
that's a bold stance, Jeremiah. Defend yourself.
I'm setting it down here. Bam. Both feet down in this camp.
All right. Terrorism. So we're coming down clearly anti-terrorism.
I'm not cool with terrorism. With yeah. I better not see that quote come out of context somewhere like it can somehow. I'm not for raping. But anyway, but the Syrian thing, I don't know. I know it's nuanced, but I think there's just a main. It's like in psychology, science in general. There's a type 1 error and type 2 error. One error has to do with thinking, or your data say that this is probable, right? So like a 99% chance. 90 or 5% chance, let's say that 95% chance that I'm right, but there's that 5% I'm wrong. Okay, so my chance for the error that I'm wrong is 5%, right? That I'm saying yes, this is the case, and 5% of the chance, or 5% chance I'm actually wrong. That's one kind of error. But then there's kind of error where you say, all right, look, it's let's say it's at 80% or 70%. Then you're like, I'm going to say no. I'm going to be a skeptic and say, although the data seem to suggest this, I'm going to say I don't believe it yet. That's a different kind of error. That's what's going on here. Is like some people value never, or like preparing for the small chance that you're wrong more than or the small chance that you're right than preparing for what's the chance that you're wrong. Wait, now I'm getting all these switches. The point is they're taking it way too careful, and they're not and they're neglecting the fact that these are people, I guess. And
you don't get to call yourself the home of the brave and the land of the free if you're not going to act brave or care about freedom. Like, I'm sorry, but these people who whine about like, oh, America used to be great and now we're not, and we got to make America great again. Like, isn't that Trump's slogan? Like, make America great again. Like, bring back America, make it number one. What makes America great as an idea is this Statue of Liberty, right? That France, by the way, gave to us. That says, let your huddled masses, your dirt, like let your people fleeing oppression come here. That's our shtick. That's our gimmick. Like McDonald's Golden Arches, ours is the Statue of Liberty saying, come here, all of you people who are fleeing oppression. We'll take you in and we'll make you something great. You don't get to complain about America not being great if you're going to not do the things that made America great in the past.
Yeah.
If you're not brave or free. Don't whine about America not being the land of the free anymore.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But anyway, that's the Syrian thing. And I carefully consider that because, this was like my job for a while, was counterterrorism. But, and I do, man, I constantly wonder if I'm going to be that old grumpy guy who's like, well, that's because the Japs. And, and you're like, oh, come on, Gramp. They're Japanese people, not Japs. What's wrong with you? Because if you go to war, like you have this constantly reinforced bad idea. And so they have
to make you think that they have to change your way of thinking to dehumanize the enemy, right? Otherwise, you're not going to be a good soldier. So it's hard to start humanizing them again once you're not in the army.
Yeah, it's difficult because everybody's a possible enemy because of the way terrorism works and the way that guerrilla tactics work. Of jumping out, you can be anyone. Like we literally had some guy that was one of the nicest guys in the world who set up a shop in the middle of our base, and then he came in with a VBED one time, which is a vehicle-borne ID. It didn't go off, thank God, but we caught him, and I was like, "What the fuck, man? He was the nicest guy. What the fuck?" I mean, I had that reaction so many times. It's it fucks you up, and so I constantly have to have this bias check and make sure I'm not going to be that guy. So
anyway, vive la France.
Vive la France. But anyway, trigger warnings.
Yeah. Main topic: trigger warnings. We talked a little bit about this on the Game Theory podcast, but trigger warnings are a big part of our culture right now. We're in this kind of, I've read a lot. I was thinking about going to academia to be a professor at university level. And one of the things that kind of scares me away from that now is the environment in higher learning that we have where we try and protect our students from words. Like we're not that old, but when we were in college, the idea of university was this free market of ideas where you could have any opinion you want as long as you could defend it, and we just had conversations and debates. And this is how we learned. We explored dangerous topics, we explored unconventional topics. A lot of kids dabble in communism when they're in college, or whatever they want to dabble in. They try it out in college and just explore it because that's the point of higher.
Ayn Randism.
Ayn Randism, yeah. A lot of people go into objectivism when they're in college. Like,
I did.
Yeah, no, I did too. I was like,
a Republican.
It's money is good. See, it's okay to be greedy. Like
get mine. I got mine.
Yeah. But it's a place to explore these ideas. And one of the reasons I'm not into Ayn Rand anymore is because I explored that idea in college and I had these conversations and I realized it was kind of fucked up a little bit. It was lacking compassion.
Yeah.
So this is how I imagine universities. This is like this place where we can go and we can learn and we can get exposed to harsh ideas, but they're shifting now into this idea of a safe space where we have trigger warnings and we have these areas where you can't bring the media to your protest, or you can't discuss rape in a psychology class because somebody in the audience was raped and it's going to really be traumatic for her. So we have to just avoid the topic altogether. Like there's all these, and they come from a good place. I think they come from this place of compassion and of trying to good intentions, right? Like protecting people. But I don't think they are very useful or healthy, or even the point of college. And that's my uninformed opinion, but you actually have some data on this because you are almost a psychologist yourself. So what are your thoughts on trigger warnings? What's the utility? What's the risks? What are the pros and cons?
Well, just as you are a man of France trademark, I am an almost psychologist trademark.
Yes.
About a year out. Is that right? Something like that. Anyway,
just like all but dissertation, right, at this point?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, okay. So first of all, a place of compassion. I try to bring everything in together. I try to get conflict resolution by finding middle ground. Here's the middle ground. People who talk about this care a lot, and that's important. They care about their fellow humans. They care about human psychology. They care about the suffering of others.
It's what we call a happy problem, right? Like they care so much.
Yeah, awesome. That's so good. They care. They want to protect people who have had horrible, traumatic experiences. That's meaningful. That makes sense, and I appreciate that. That's awesome. Can care ever go wrong? Yes, but what does it take? It really takes someone trying the best they can, but not understanding the mechanisms that go into it. For example, you have a child that's 38 that lives in your basement. You keep bringing him food and you never ask him about work because you don't want to make, he's suffering. He looks bad whenever he does that. He's like, I don't want to talk about that, Mom. I'm depressed or whatever. And you're like, well, I don't want you to be depressed. I won't ask about it. That's important. You're trying your best to make sure your son's not depressed. That's good. But once you understand the mechanisms behind these things, you realize you're actually doing more harm than you are good. Okay,
it's like how George Washington died, right? Like he basically had pneumonia, but doctors kept bleeding him with leeches because that's what they did. And then they ended up bleeding to the point where he couldn't fight the disease anymore because he'd lost so much blood. And so he ended up dying an excruciating death of, being consumed by bloodworms, when we could have probably helped him if we'd understood it. But they weren't trying to hurt President George Washington, father of the country, hashtag true America, hashtag, whatever.
Hashtag wooden teeth.
Fathers.
Hashtag wooden teeth.
They were trying to help him, but they just were doing it poorly. It was good intentions, but with lack of knowledge of how to cure pneumonia.
Yeah. So whenever I have to admit to you, I got to be 100% honest. There's a moment of every time I see trigger warning, I do this. Oh God, can we be done with this? Now, with that said, that is only because of my frustration of the lack of science's ability to get out why this is a bad idea. Okay. Mm-hmm. Not because of these people, it has nothing to do with the people who do it, but I am frustrated with it. So I thought I'd say something. Additionally, JT had asked me about it yesterday. I think he's going to write something up and he wanted my opinion about it. He wanted me to write something about it. I'm just going to do it here so he can link to it or whatever. Here's the deal with trigger warnings. Let me just, let me see if you want to burn a couple seconds. There's someone who wrote an article that I thought was very meaningful and it could help. There it is. It could help explain this and get the idea from the other side so that I'm not straw manning. It says, it's from Everyday Feminism, and it's a very popular article. It's called, When You Oppose Trigger Warnings, You're Really Saying These 8 Things. Have you seen this yet?
I have not.
Okay. It got a ton of hits for the site. Great idea. Okay. So there's 8 points they make. Okay. 1, adding a couple of words at the beginning of my content is so hard. Right. So that would be a reason why you'd sue that. Obviously, she's being tongue in cheek in here, the author.
Okay. I don't think that's an actual.
Or sorry.
I don't think that's an actual.
Yeah.
That might be a bit of a straw man. I don't think a lot of people.
The whole thing is a straw man.
Okay.
But try to take the snarky, asinine attitude and, understand that he's actually trying to address a real point. So adding a couple of words at the beginning of my content is so hard. So, he's saying like, it's not that hard. You can do it. But some people may not want to because they're like, I don't want to. I don't want to take the time out.
Okay.
2, PTSD ? Lols. Who cares? So then here's where he builds a little bit. Here's where he attacks that straw man. But here's where he builds a little bit of like, hey, guys, it's a big deal, which is a good sentiment.
Sure.
3, I really want to make your already difficult life more difficult. No one really thinks like that. But he's trying to say like, here's the repercussions. And you're making people who have had real world horrible things happen to them, traumatic, awful things, whether it's, rape, sexual abuse,
or
near-death experiences, anything.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to make their life more difficult. That's a good sentiment. Good. Sam Finch is the guy, by the way. So Sam, he's got a good idea. 4, go ahead, have a panic attack today. It just says, okay, these things can lead to serious problems like panic attacks. True.
Okay.
5, I don't think making my content accessible is all that important. Straw man, but you get the idea. You'll make your stuff more accessible if you do this, right? 6, stigmatizing mental health conditions is a cool hobby of mine.
All right.
More of the same. But he's saying, hey, you're stigmatizing mental health.
By not doing trigger warnings, you're stigmatizing mental health.
He's saying, okay, so he says, when you act like, because this one's a little, dicey. When you act like a content warnings, this is a quote, when you act like content warnings are just a silly request, what you're really saying is that mental illness and the people who are surviving with it every day are just silly. So there's some of that. I can get that. Some people are like, oh, whatever, just get over
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So good sentiment. 7, I like to ignore my audience and my impact. Again, snark, but
just, not thinking about what your words are doing to the people that listen to them.
Yeah, you're fucking with your own audience. 8, your trauma doesn't matter to me. All right. The point he's making here is that it should matter, I think. Trauma should matter. So all that, how could that possibly miss the point? How could, it seems pretty comprehensive. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's basically all of this from what I haven't read the article, but from what you just summarized, it seems like it's all based on the premise that trigger warnings are helping those people who are traumatized. Like if the premise is false, the whole thing kind of crumbles at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly it. Yeah. Is this helping the person? Is this good for them? Does it make them happier? Does it mitigate harm? Like anything you could ask of that question, it actually doesn't. So the questions are, is it protecting this person? Well, actually, let's unpack that word. It's a little weird. Is it mitigating the most amount of harm? Demonstrably and evidence-wise, no, absolutely not. Absolutely, there's not a single psychologist that you can find, not a single one who's evidence-based who will agree with you on this. I have tons on record of the top trauma centers in the world who say, do not do this content warning. So I'm just another voice in here, but just please, if you listen to this podcast, you're hearing me and not them. Don't do this.
Yeah.
Don't do content warning. Don't do trigger warnings. Don't do it. You have the best heart. I love that. We all do. No one is being mean here. Don't make us into demons. We're here to do the same things you're doing, which is to mitigate harm, to get this person better.
All you're doing is saying, thank you for trying to save the president, but leeches aren't the way to go about it.
Yes, exactly. Or like, hey, I know you're bringing your son mayonnaise sandwiches every day or whatever it is he loves. He's now living an unhealthy lifestyle. He's obese. He's got heart disease. He doesn't have a job and he wants a job. You're hurting, dude. Don't do this. That's what I'm saying. So how could this possibly be wrong? So first of all, I wanted to take a human moment and say, like, I get it. I'm not stigmatizing trauma. I've been through that shit. It sucks. As I mentioned on the other podcast, there'd be nights where it's called hypervigilance, but it sucks. I sat there.
Yeah.
It's like a buzzing in your head, and like I couldn't sleep for 3 days. And after one of these events, but
for people new to the show, like you were in Iraq, like you went to war.
Yeah, and I got into some shit. And anyway, it affects you. And there was a point where I would just listen to like soft music, and I would just sit in the corner in my room instead of sleeping for like 4 hours straight. And I would just, it's horrible. I have more empathy than any of these, bullshit activists could have because I had it. I know, I get it. I am now better because I did the right thing, and it is not trigger warning. It's evidence-based therapy. Gradual exposure, prolonged exposure, both have similar response rates, but it's good. It worked. And now I'm better. But the reason why is because of this. So how do we address trauma? If someone was, raped, if someone had to kill a bunch of people or saw people blown up or horrible things that could happen in life, how do we address this? Well, okay. So this has to do with how we learn to respond to trauma and how PTSD occurs. So what do you know about PTSD and how you get it?
We first started noticing it as a thing. I'm sure it's been around forever, but we first started talking about it in World War I with the idea of being shell-shocked. Yeah. And we had no idea how to cure it. In fact, a lot of people still conflate it with just cowardice. So there's some horrible, if you listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History about World War I, there are some horrible things we did as the good guys to people who just were suffering from PTSD. Like we would just string them up and shoot them to raise morale of everybody else because they were being cowardly or unmanly because they were scared. So we've come a long way in a short amount of time as far as PTSD goes to understanding what it is. From my layman's knowledge, it's this idea that you've been through some sort of trauma, some sort of high anxiety, life or death situation, and it leaves a mark. It resonates psychological damage. So it could be like with you where you couldn't sleep. It could be sometimes people I don't know. I don't want to conjecture too much, but the idea is that you've seen something terrible and it's negatively impacting your life forevermore, just like losing a limb would in a war. Like it's just some part of you that's damaged now.
And not forevermore. I mean, this is one of our this is one of our best.
But if left untreated, it's one of those things that kind of lingers.
We have the high success rates for treatment. So this is why I give a shit, because you can get into treatment and get better. Demonstrably, my life went from not being able to do anything. I couldn't even go out on missions. I got put into a room and said, just stay there until we can get you to combat stress, to now I'm getting a PhD. We're talking huge life changes. Mm-hmm. Do you want that, or do you want someone who can't go on the internet because trigger warnings, right? Like first of all, it's easy to do. He's right. It's easy to do, but here's why it's wrong. So here's how you get PTSD. You have something bad happen, and then over time, it stresses you. It's so bad that you have nightmares of it, and everything else happens. So how do we get rid of it? Well, it has to do with how was this brought about? And I already told the story on the other podcast about how Watson, one of the fathers, John Watson of behaviorism, how he found out about this kind of underlying principle, which is systematic desensitization. Mm-hmm. So what happens if something horrible happens to you? They took this baby who was super, they got the bravest baby in the world. No kidding. They literally, that was the advertisement. And they systematically walked through a bunch of them until they found this baby who will hold snakes, will play with this white lab rat. Most babies for some reason are scared of rats. And what else? Oh yeah, like he wasn't afraid of fire. They gave him a newspaper and lit it on fire, and he tried to eat it. This kid was incredibly brave. And they're like, perfect. We're starting so far off away from our end zone here. This will be perfect. So they took this kid and they fucked him up. And I'm not kidding, to the point where people were like, dude, how are you going to fix him? Because what they did was they had a rat and they'd introduce it. And of course, this little baby goes for the rat. He starts to reach for it. And they would bang two metal objects as loud as they could together, which has a natural response in all humans. We blink and we go, and we have a startle effect. Yeah. And that's what happened. Yeah, and then they kept doing that, just like Pavlov's dog. Imagine what happens over time when they keep doing this. And this is a baby, dude. What the fuck? But anyway.
So eventually this baby ends up terrified of white rats, also white colors, also furry things, just everything generalized into.
And all of anxiety disorders can have a part of this in this, okay? This systematic, or this is how we're about to address it. So now we've got a young baby who, this is what's interesting. Punishers generalize across different stimuli more rapidly than reinforcers. So if we give him a piece of candy every time he touched that rat, this wouldn't happen. But here's what did happen because it was a punisher, okay? What happened is you've got this rat. You're terrified of it at this point. When it came in, they release it. He start crying and go, and he'd crawl the other side. He'd try to get away from it, right? He doesn't want any part of this rat. But what's interesting, and the mom came to pick her up. She was a night shift nurse. Night shift nurse? I think she was a night shift nurse. She was a nurse in general in town. And so she came to pick him up from the experimentation afterwards. And one of the times the baby just starts bawling as soon as he sees mom. Ah! And normally he's a great kid. So she's like, what's going on? She's wearing a white fluffy coat. So a white hair, like animal fur coat.
So he's generalized the furriness and the whiteness to the coat even. So even his mom wearing that coat still invokes a fear response.
Yeah. So now he has a fear response to white things, because we also tested whiteness in the furry things, to furry things, especially white furry things, and especially white furry rats, right? Mm-hmm. So what's odd is that fear and that terror has generalized across stimuli to the point where its characteristics have taken on. Even a slight hint of a characteristic of that thing will cause the same response of, no. That's PTSD. So you get peri-trauma, which is like anything surrounding trauma, right? Mm-hmm. So like for me, for example, one of the situations was someone got blown the fuck up in front of me, a few people, and they turned into ribbons and disgusting shit. And I got fucked up because of that. But now whenever I hear or whenever I see like something that looks, that's getting a little too specific, but like spaghetti, for example, I would get weird. I was just like, I couldn't eat it, and because that's something that it's like the whiteness of the rat or the furriness of the rat. Now we've got something
enough to the trauma that it's
boom, my response,
anxiety response.
Yeah, stimulus response, bam, I'm oh shit, and I'm So I'm reading an article online. I get something that quote unquote triggers me. I'm oh my god, it reminds me of thinking my rape. Oh my gosh. Okay, so now we've got the problem. We understand the problem, right? And imagine that I'm treating someone with PTSD or a phobia in general, any kind of anxiety that starts like this. I go to address it. So what reinforces this over time? First of all, there's two bits, behavioral and cognitive. This is why cognitive behavioral. One is behavioral. What we can do then, and this is what we did. So they published this paper about this baby, right? They're like, well, here's where we're at. They've sent it off. And almost overwhelmingly, the response was, what the fuck? That's a baby. What are you going to do to fix it?
Can you fix the baby?
Yeah. And so, and I can't remember the name of the researcher who was like, oh, we should try this, but it wasn't Watson.
Is this how they fixed it? Did they avoid ever letting him see the color white again?
No, and they weren't like, oh my gosh, hey, you're gonna go into a movie, it's gonna have furry stuff, so be careful. You don't do that. Like, in fact, that would perpetuate the problem. Or right now, from our understanding, from what we've said, it wouldn't perpetuate it, but it would allow it to live, right?
Right.
It would just never be tested. But I'm about to show how that's even bad in itself. So, two things. One is the behavioral. So what they did was they were like, okay, what we need to do is show that when this rat shows up, we don't have any reason to be like that, right? Terrified. We don't need to pump up our central nervous system. So we're going to introduce the rat, without any banging. Well, they try that. What happens? They show them the rat. Yeah, terrified as fuck, of course. He's like, because at this point, it's like Pavlov's dog. It's taken on the properties of the original stimulus.
Right.
Of the banging, rather. We're conditioned now. So they're like, well, shit, how do we do it? Oh, okay. Here's how we do it in psychology. A ladder, right? A hierarchy of 1 to 10. Okay, 10 would be whatever it is. So putting me back in combat and having that same thing happen, right? And
keep killing people in front of you until you stop being scared of it.
Yeah, but that's
probably not ideal.
Yeah, right. And a lot of people do that, like face your fears. I'm like, that's hold on, like
scared of spiders, are you? What if I put you in a box full of spiders? That would.
Yeah, I know. And this is, I've noticed that every scholar that I've ever met always says, it's nuanced or it's complicated, right? Whenever you make generalizations like of people's understandings, because sometimes they tried it and it worked, and sometimes they tried it and it didn't work, but confirmation bias, why not? Our axiom is true. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, or out of sight, out of mind. Which one's true? Who knows? Based on my situation, I'm going to pull one of those two and pretend it's always true. But so same thing here. Face your fear. Yes, it does work occasionally. Here's how you do it. So here, what we would do is say, all right, little baby, or actually let's take it. Let's say it's a full grown adult who's terrified of mice at this point. You say, okay, so a 10 would be putting in a box full of mice. Like, yes. Okay. So if it's a 10, what would a 1 look like? And they're like, or a 5, something less. And they're like,
like 1 would be like a white fluffy cloud, and 5
or
might be like a cartoon with a mouse in it.
Yeah. So exactly. Or like, what about a mouse in just inside of your same room? And they're like, oh, well, if it's nowhere near me, I'm like, yeah, it's nowhere near you. And let's say it's partitioned off. It can't get to you. They're like, well, an 8. That's terrifying, but I'm not going to go into full panic attack mode or full terror mode.
Right.
I'm like, okay, so there you go. That's an 8. What's a 5? And then I work down all the way to 1. And we get a 1 through 10 with markers on each number or every other number, but each number would be great. And then we start addressing those. So you start introducing those. You say like, okay, so, oh, look, you're holding a white piece of paper. How do you feel? I don't know. I'm feeling a little bit. My hands are sweating. I'm a little nervous, but I'm okay. You'd be like, okay, we're just going to hold on to that weight, because your central nervous system cranks up. But then over time, when no real threat and it's not being used, fight, flight, or freeze, your parasympathetic nervous system jumps in and dumps a bunch of chemicals to calm you down, or a bunch, appropriate number. And since you're barely, does a little bit. But the point is it comes down and you go, all right, how do you feel now? And eventually they're like, well, I guess I'm a 0 now. And you're like, but you're still holding that white paper. And they're like, yeah, I guess so. And you'd be like, okay, cool. Got that one. And then you keep moving up. Eventually, you're going to have them holding rats and play with them just like they did this little baby. Pretty soon, the baby was just playing with rats. He was fine again. But how did he get better? How did he achieve his full functionality by not avoiding trigger warnings? Trigger warnings suck. Trauma sucks. I get it. I work with people like this. I had it. I know people who have it. It's horrible.
Right. But you're not just conjecturing, but your career is dealing with people with trauma. Like
so personal and academic. I get it. But the trigger warnings, it's not helping anyone. In fact, it's helpful to do this. And more importantly, the top trauma centers in the world are in the US, because we're big on psychology. But you won't find a single psychologist in any of those centers, or hopefully anywhere, anyone who believes in evidence-based therapy. And nor have I ever found one. I've had personal correlations or correspondence with plenty of trauma researchers. There's not a single one that will ever say that trigger warnings are good. In fact, they speak out agagst them regularly.
Okay, so here's what someone might say who would push back against this. So let me run this by you, and you can tell me if this is on the mark or not. They might say, yes, exposure therapy is good, like it's proven it works, but is a speech at a college or at a conference or anywhere, is that the is that where we should start exposure therapy? Or could, like, I'm not a psychologist, so I could be doing more harm than good if I just shout like, and then you get raped, just randomly in the middle of a thing, because I want the rape victim to feel like they were exposed to the idea. So is there something to be said for, in the context of therapy, doing exposure therapy, but in the context of a speech, just putting the trigger warning out there for people to know? Or counterpoint, would elevating that to a trigger warning meriting thing, would that actually make it worse? Like, is it causing any harm at all? Or is it something we just do to be safe?
Okay, I want to get to that exact answer because that's important. Also, let me address the cognitive bit, because you can fuck this up for yourself. And this is where therapy can come in as well. This is, remember, behavioral. We just talked about behavioral. That was straight at behavioral. You put your body in a position.
Stimulus response.
Yeah, you break that apart. Now, here's what's shitty. You can also, so let's say you do this, you can perseverate. And this is what happens with people with GAD and a lot of different things, but you can perseverate over something, which means kind of ruminate or think about obsessively. And so, like, let's say you get in a situation and you're reading a book and it says something about rape, or in my example, it says something about being blown up, or I'm playing a video game. And this happened one time. I was playing Battlefield 4 and something happened, and I was like, oh, whoa. And I felt, because of I have a nice little speaker system here and a big screen TV here. So I'm like, oh, I'm playing. And there was a moment that reminded me very much of something in my past. And I paused it. I set it down, and I noticed my hands were sweating, and I was like, oh my gosh, and my pulse was way up. It was like, and I was like, oh, whoa, that was fucking real. Like, there was a moment where I was like, I was staring at the screen like this, and I was like, oh man, before, if I hadn't got treatment, that would have probably went full up. I don't know. Actually, it would have went up a lot more. But okay, here's how you deal with that immediately after is paramount. So if I would have been like, and I would have started perseverating over the things I saw and like reliving the trauma as best I could in my head, what do you think that's going to do? Do you think that's going to help or hurt my situation?
It's definitely going to reinforce the anxiety that situation brings.
Right. So like, if I was,
it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like your body's like, oh, I'm in trouble. And you're like, yeah, you are in trouble. Let's think about this for a minute. It's going to reinforce it.
So two things there. One, that's how panic disorder starts. People are like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. And what does that do? That scares you. What happens then? You dump a bunch of chemicals in your system. What happens? Oh, heart rate goes up. Oh my gosh, my heart rate is going up. It's going to explode. And I've had panic attacks. That's what I thought. I was like, oh my God, I think I skipped a beat. And then it freaked out even more. Pretty soon I'm having a full-blown panic attack, which is just a false alarm. It's crazy. Once I went through therapy and realized what it was, I haven't had one since. And it's because I realize what it is, but it's hard to convince yourself that. So what happens is you can freak yourself the fuck out and make it very unpleasurable. A panic attack is the most unpleasurable thing ever. Close. It's horrible. And so I had one of those, and I was like, oh, I had a ton, but at this one example, I made it bad. So it's like if I went to go to exposure therapy with someone who's afraid of claustrophobia, and so we went into an elevator. We're up, we're on, and this isn't the first thing you do, but eventually we get there, and then the elevator locks shut, and we're locked in there for a day or 24 hours or something. We've just fucked ourselves up. It's nothing about our situation that's bad. It's the fact that, because we're not going to die, right? We're fine. But or let's say an hour, and 24 hours you might have some dehydration, but whatever. So it's nothing about our situation is going to kill us. We both know we're perfectly safe as far as like dying. But the thoughts that go through that patient's head, whether it's a guy or a girl, is like, oh my God, that's going to be a 10, right? You've just made it worse. Now, are they more or less likely to get into a box, elevator of any kind, or a box of any kind, but an elevator? Right. Much less likely. So what you have to do is you have to teach people to have to uncouple people's habituation or habit.
And this is the cognitive aspect.
Yeah, of escalating it cognitively whenever they're exposed to the trigger. So that's another entry point here is be like, okay, so you need a little psycho ed. When these things happen, you're not in danger. When somebody says rape or whatever, or if somebody shows a blown up person, you're not in danger. You're fine. All that. So you have to catch it. So it's almost like deep breathing when you're having an asthma attack. It's it's counterintuitive, but it's most important thing you can do, right? Like, or deep breathing, panic attack, breathing through your stomach and that kind of thing. It's hard to do, but once you do it repeatedly, you master it, and pretty soon you're fine. So there's that, and then. So your question is, during these situations, should we be giving those things or giving those talks? Okay, so it depends on the severity of your stimulus, right? Like I assume no one's actually going to be raping or blowing up their audience or having their audience shoot people, right?
Right.
That would be a 10?
That would be a 10. That would be...
Right. So behaviorally, that would be a 10. We know that's a 10. Don't do that.
Right.
You've also got people who are very sensitive who could blow it up cognitively, right? If those people, at this point in life, what they need to do is they've already learned that there'll be times they've understood this word trigger. They know what it means, right? They're educated enough that they know what trigger warning is. They know what triggers are. Part of that education needs to be, and you can get better, and these trigger warnings actually help. Don't spiral off cognitively. And that's whenever I'm saying that, I'm not saying that's 100% chance. That's a small percentage of people who do that. But those people who do that, it's like people who start, I don't know, jumping up and down and screaming if they're having a heart attack. You're just like, what are you doing? Don't do that. Like, it's the same thing with the cognitive part. It's rare, but people might do it. And then you're like, what are you doing? You're making it worse. Don't go off and perseverate over this thing. But yeah, it's very rare. So I would say that, if you're showing like graphical pictures of people getting blown the fuck up, and that you might be talking to veterans, then, there's a point where you could say something like, hey, just to let you guys know, we're going to be doing this. And I know some veterans.
Maybe inappropriate to family, whatever, like the BBC does it every day.
Right. But
following images could be considered disturbing. Heads up.
Here's what an evidence-based therapist does. Every time someone says, this is why I'm going to show you, this is actually a good thing. You want this. So you come in a session, let's say you're someone with PTSD, you've been raped. Okay. So you come in and you're like, oh, let me tell you, Jeremiah, I saw this presentation where they said the word rape, or they, showed a woman who had just been raped, not in real life, but the picture was of a woman who, presumably the actress was acting as if she was raped. And you were like, and that was just, it was great. Here's what I do. Here's what every evidence-based therapist does. Really? Good. How did you respond? That's what we say every time. It's a good thing that you have these safe environment. Remember, so what we're doing is we're showing you the white thing or the furry thing and showing no banging of the pipe, right? That's what we're doing. We're like, did you get raped? They're like, no. Okay. So how did that feel then? If afterwards, right after that happened, nothing bad happened, how did you respond? They're like, well, I got up and ran out. I'd be like, okay, I would consider that a bad thing. I'd be like, oh, okay, all right. So we still have some work to do there. We'll start a little earlier, but that's definitely a maladaptive response. Okay. And so if we start doing this, then what we're telling ourselves is that we need to start sculpting the environment so that people can never get better. Because what gets people in therapy, do you know why people show up?
When they to the point where they either the court orders them to go to therapy, or they realize that they have no other options and they have to get this fixed.
Dysfunction.
We would call that rock bottom in terms.
And no, I mean, most people come in before that. But for people who have to get exposure therapy, exposure is uncomfortable. And we have a large dropout rate because you start moving up and people are like, I don't want to do that thing. I'm not ready. And we're like, okay. And, we work through that. We're like, okay, so right now you're having these thoughts come in saying you're not ready. You're not ready. All right. I get that. How are you feeling? Oh man, my heart's racing. And we walk through that and we realize that there's no threat here. Use some mindfulness. We're present. There's no threat. And then we choose to do the exposure anyway, but it's aversive. And the only reason why people keep coming, and this is qualitative data, but people will say, because I can't do it without it. Right. This is life. And then there's that moment. Okay. It's just at the top of the roller coaster. And then after that, that's the best word of mouth people can get. OCD, all the anxiety disorders like that. OCD, PTSD, panic attack, those are all very curable. And as soon as you finish, you get the best word of mouth because people drastically have their lives different. So it's like when pushing that kid out of the door who has, who's had a life where it's been a little too easy on him. Let's say he's a Pierce Hawthorne, right, from Community. He's got his whole life handed to him on a platter or whatever. Life situations have dictated him in such a way where it's going to have to get much more unpleasant before it gets pleasant. That's a good thing. And more importantly, it's good that it's introduced in a safe setting like the university. Like if it's a rape victim and she's walking through a campus at night, don't run up and say, I'm going to rape you. That would be the worst thing in the world.
That's a 9 or a 10. Like that's not where you want to start. But in an auditorium with 200 people, it's a completely safe environment. It's a PowerPoint presentation. Like that's actually a good place to start having the association between the idea of rape and the idea of safety.
And one of the first steps you're going to do in therapy, or usually people do this indigenously anyway. Indigenously? The people do this anyway, automatically. Yeah, intrinsically. Well, people will start to avoid things. And that's the worst part. Avoidance is the number one worst thing you can do. But they'll start to avoid situations where they suspect you might be triggered, right? So they're already doing this. And if they're not, if you come across an article and you're in the safety of your home or wherever you are and you read this thing, that's good. And if you're escalating to a panic attack from reading something on the internet, you should have been in psychological services a long time ago. I'm telling you, your life could be 100% better. I'm speaking from personal experience and from doing this on a regular basis. Our clinic gets tons of exposure therapy, and people love it on the other end, but it's uncomfortable until then. And so you need to go to treatment immediately. Don't help that person. I mean, help them if they're having a panic attack right then. But like if there's someone who repeatedly and predictably has panic attacks, acute panic attacks because of reading something, they need to get into therapy right now, and you'll get better. Just go get better.
Yeah, it's maladaptive, but it can be cured.
Don't take benzodiazepines to calm down your panic attacks and just continue living life. No, go get better. Anyway, so that in particular is a passionate part of mine. And trigger warnings in general, like I said, I'm not shitting on them. I get it. I of all people get it, professionally and personally. I get it. Combat trauma is measurably one of the worst kinds of trauma. And I won't start that whole thing here. I got into debate at a conference one time. Anyway, but it doesn't matter. The point is I get it. More than anyone else, I get it. It sucks. But it gets better. And more importantly, trigger warnings are actually harming people. And more importantly, not a single evidence-based psychologist will ever agree on the other part of this thing. We've been pretty vocal about this. Guys, stop. I know
Why
you guys
do you think it is that it's become such accepted wisdom online or in academic communities? Like there are scientists in academic communities. Like why is this the first time I'm hearing about this as a layperson who doesn't follow the psychology? Why is there society just agreed that without questioning trigger warnings are a thing we do now?
Well, you're asking, the question you're asking right now is exactly what I'm researching for my dissertation. How don't people know this shit? You can Google it. If you just Google science harmful trigger warnings or science, whatever, it's because they're not looking for that. They're looking for trigger warnings, good, enter, or whatever, right? I'm trying to
looking for proof of what you already believe. But it's weird that this idea kind of caught on and nobody questioned it.
Well, we are, but science is that's the most interesting thing to me.
Nobody that like is in the position of authority, right? Like scientists are, but the people who set the tone for these things, are not scientists.
Exactly, and that's the thing that I'm looking at is how to get more science permeating through modern culture, because we're screaming at the top of our lungs, stop, and nobody's listening. And so that's
probably feel like climate scientists feel on a daily basis.
Ugh. Yeah, or evolutionary scientists. Exactly. It's like, really, no, we test this and we know this. Stop downplaying this. And it's probably because psychologists in general, we have a dirty history, and there's still some dirt we're cleaning in the field.
Yeah, you tortured a baby to find this information out.
Yeah, we literally did. But then we learned how to cure it. And not to say that was worth it, but I'm saying that now that we know that, we could have done that through many different means. But the fact that we did do that is shitty. But it's sort of like, remember all those World War II shitty experiments they did in Germany? We learned
then we hired them from NASA.
yeah. And not that it was worth it. It's not. But I'm just saying that you cut a lot of corners and did horrible things. Anyway, but it's not that those. I would take value if I was one of those victims and be like, well, at least I contribute. At least something.
And that's one thing about our circle atheism. Just because you don't believe in God doesn't mean you have the other questions right. Like atheists tend to be wrong about a lot of things, just like everybody else. Like we just assume they're like, oh, he's a critical thinker, he's an atheist. No, it's not always the case. There are atheists who believe in Bigfoot or UFOs or crystals or chakras. Like there's a lot of things that we accept without being critical. And I think this is one of those things that a lot of people in the atheist community have just not thought critically about and just kind of accepted. Yeah,
I know, because it's just, it's got such a good purpose behind it.
It's coming from a place of compassion, and we tend to value compassion. Like secular humanism is about caring about humans, so you can see why it would lead to that direction. It's just it's funny how upset people get when the science has been done on this. It's a solved question.
And this is a good conflict resolution skill of all kinds. Is I just agree with the person. So if someone came to me about this, which I assume I'm going to get some kickback, and people are going to say like, what's wrong with you? You're a monster. And be like, tell me more about that. What I do is over listening, where you want to say something, but you just listen. And I go, tell me more about that. And they're like, well, you're a fucking monster. You're saying that you want people to have panic attacks reading in their safety of their own home. I'd be like, that would be horrible. That's horrible. That's a horrible thing to ask of people. And then they're like, well, and you just keep agreeing with them because that's not you. What they're doing is they're painting a picture of you that's not you, right? Yeah. Like, and you're just agreeing. You're like,
that's a terrible straw man. I would hate that position.
Exactly. Yeah. Without using those words, that's what I do. And I encourage this in marital therapy and conflict resolution in general. It's like, that's awful. And you empathize with it, and they're like, well, then what the fuck? And be like, what do you mean? Do you want to know? What do you want to know? Do you want me to understand your position, or do you want to hear what why I would possibly, or how that could possibly be something other than me. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And then I talk, but
yeah,
just in general, yeah, you're right. That would be horrible. I would be a horrible person. Here's the thing. We both love the fact that we love people. We don't want people to hurt. We want to mitigate harm. Here's how to do it.
Right.
So,
cool.
Anyway.
Well, hopefully that answered JT's question about trigger warnings. It seems to be one of those things that keeps coming up in the atheist movement, the idea of how do we create a safe space without causing more harm than good. It's where this is coming from, because the idea of I'm fine with the idea of a safe space. I like the idea that we can all get together and we don't have to worry about somebody like just being like, you fucking idiot, you're the worst, get out of here, everyone laugh at this guy. Like that's not not progressive, but it's not a conductive place for good conversation. Like that idea of a safe space I can get behind, but safe space meaning that we just can't talk about certain subjects because they're taboo now, that's too close to religion for me. And it also seems to be pretty harmful. So, I mean, there's a reason that the word taboo comes from religious, it's a sociological religious term. Taboos are things that in tribes or something, it's like, oh, we don't eat pork, that's a taboo. We don't need to have taboos in a non-religious world.
Well, the reason why taboo things like that came up is because it protects you from something, right? Like incest was taboo. Reason why is it protects you from having genetic abnormalities in your offspring.
Right.
That's important. And beyond that, you don't find your siblings attractive, but like if there's other kinds of taboos, like don't eat pork, that's because they didn't understand how to clean the animals, right? They didn't understand. Like shellfish was, might as well, you should murder someone who eats shellfish. That's because they could bring in a lot of seaborne diseases.
We still get sick from eating shellfish sometimes. It's
so it makes sense.
It's food.
It protects them, but once you understand the mechanism of that, you can say, "Oh, here are the situations in which it's bad, and here are all the times when a shrimp cocktail is going to awesome a party
Instead of
up."
a blanket taboo rule, we can actually understand what's going on.
Yeah, and that's what's going on here. Like, if any of you are right and have a blog and have people who are triggered by things, encourage them to get their ass to an evidence-based exposure therapist, which is the same thing, but make sure they say that, because some people have learned to say evidence-based and they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Mm-hmm. But someone who reads journals, in other words, and 100% of us will fix you. It's great. It's a big difference.
Very curable.
Don't just by consistently allowing them a place where they never are motivated to go get treatment, because taking benzos and SSRIs and just chilling, that's a seductive place, man. It's awesome.
It's like, imagine a world where we can cure any disability. Like if you're missing your legs, I can inject you with nanobots or something, and they'll help you grow new legs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now we're still arguing for wheelchair ramps. It's like, no, we can actually fix it where you don't need the ramp anymore. Like, this is what we're trying to do, is actually cure you instead of just accommodate your disability. Like, sadly, we can't grow new legs, but we can cure PTSD or various other anxiety disorders.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You don't have to keep taking those pain pills, bro. Like, you can just get new legs. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with, medication has its purposes. It certainly does. But in anxiety disorders, it is more often than not harmful, and demonstrably so. I don't even have to say it's from science, but here I am disseminating science again. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Cool.
Well, cool. I hope that wraps it up, dudes. And if you guys have any problems, of course, you can contact us. Let me know if you have any questions or criticisms. Just let me know. I can direct you towards anything you need.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/GodTheoryPodcast, one word, or you can email us. That's is it the GodTheoryPodcast@gmail.com?
Yeah, that's it. Also, we have a Twitter, twitter.com/GodTheoryPod. Yeah. So yeah, and sometimes we get a little political on the podcast, but who doesn't? It's time. Yeah. It's time to do it.
It's time. Feel the burn.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. We'll see you guys hopefully next week. We're going to try to do it. I know I'm going to the mountains for a while. I'm going to try to be back in time, get another episode out. But if not, it's holidays. Enjoy your Thanksgivings and Black Fridays, and don't stomp or kill anyone. All right. See you guys.